start now that the late members have come? Right then, here we go. And welcome to the meeting. Everybody now should be full of spirit because they've had a month off, or most people have, which is far too much for most people to cope with. But anyway, you've already a month off and back on to the first cabinet. Item 1 is attendance. There's a sheet going round. Apologies for absence. There isn't any. Declarations of interest. We all have to make declarations as far as the education subject is concerned. Linda?
Leader, I think I've advised those members who are council-appointed governors for secondary schools that have a sixth form or might be affected by this. And I think it's probably Councillor Cunningham with St Albans and Councillor Richard Clark with Croeso Ceiliog are the two personal interests that should be declared. I don't think any of the other members should be declaring in relation to this. Is that all right? Thank you, members.
Here we are, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9. These computers have been off for so long that, no, they haven't gone rusty, but they're actually a bit slow, and we've got our colleague from IT to come and assist.
Thanks. Keep clicking on it.
Right. Right. Yeah, we could do. Right, here we go then. That's the minutes. All agree the minutes, please show. Thanks very much. Item 5 is the action sheet to Executive.
Thank you, Leader. They're there for information unless members have any questions.
Any members going to make any comments? If not, then we're on to item 6, which is the initial financial plan, and this is Nigel Aurelius. Over to you, Nigel.
Thank you, Leader. This is the report we put out at this time every year, just reporting on the Q1 position. And as the key messages indicates it's the early forecast indicates a favourable position of around 141,000 on our management accounts, and obviously with the further 900,000 which relates to the change that members made or agreed to make in relation to the minimum revenue provision, which was never part of our agreed budget for 2015-16. The background to the report just takes you through the budget. Then in 5.1 you've got the revenue forecast for the year, which shows those numbers. You've then got a set of summary paragraphs which take you through the position as it applies to each services, and with the exception of social care, it's all around the margins given the scale of the budgets, so it's showing broadly on line. With respect to social care and housing, it's showing a positive position of 166,000. You can see there are some ups or overspends in relation to children and families services and the reasons there, and some favourable swings in adult services. But you need to put that 166,000 in context of a budget of £40 million, a large chunk of which is demand-led. So, at the moment, we would start to see social care as being broadly online for the year and a positive position. Don't intend to comment on the other services. The reasons are there, and as I say, they're largely around the margins. There's a paragraph on the minimum revenue provision, which just acknowledges we made that change as part of moving through the end of 14-15 and as part of the Treasury management consideration for 15-16, but didn't build it into the budget, and we will use it to supplement balances to support change and transformation as we go forward. There's then 3 paragraphs on the savings within the budget, which tracks the savings progress on the agreed savings that were part of the budget for 15-16, and you will see, you know, a significant number are anticipated and achieved. There's a paragraph on those where they are causing some problems, and then there's a table with some alternatives that are coming forward as services anticipate early problems with some savings and put in alternatives. The next section of the report is on the use of reserves, and you can see in the table on 6.3 we're expecting all our categories of reserves to fall before the end of the year, which is to be expected, and the reasons why the general fund reserve is falling are outlined there in 6.4. There's a paragraph on school balances, and then there's a table on all the service area specific reserves, and you can see some of them are dropping off quite significantly as we move through the year. There's a part on capital which shows we're broadly there or thereabouts, and obviously we're dominated by 21st century schools in relation to capital, and we're starting to spend significant money now during 2015-16. It's nice to be able to say that, isn't it? We're starting to spend significant money now on our 21st century schools programme. So in overall terms, Cabinet, it's a positive position as at Q1. It is only Q1, so all services need to maintain that discipline and achieve the savings and ensure a balanced budget, because it will just mean that we don't have that problem as part of 2016-17 as well.
Right, thank you for that, Nigel. Seems like a good report, Anthony.
Yes, I'd like to welcome the report from Nigel. That's a favourable report at this time of the year. Nigel pointed out the importance of discipline in such tough times for us financially as a council. I won't repeat that. Also to mirror what he said about the modest level of our reserves and the fact that they're falling, and I think hopefully that message will be recognised by Welsh Government. The figures need to, of course, be looked at in the context of total spends. Nigel mentioned the figure in social care, but the figure of under and overspends can often be reported out of the context of the fact that we're dealing with budgets of several tens of millions of pounds in many cases. Another point I'd like to make at this point of the year, looking forward to next year, is about the timing of the financial information we get ultimately from the Westminster Government, and that's something that I think concerns us a great deal at the moment. There are signs that we're not going to get the level of detail of our finances for coming years until, you know, well beyond the autumn period into Christmas time, and that really makes it tough for councils to plan their finances properly. And I think that's the message that really needs to go out to the UK government and to the Welsh government, is that we need as much time as we can possibly get if we're to do what they ask us to do, which is to plan sensibly for the future, especially when there's such a lack of money around. So thank you to Nigel for the report, and thank you to the officers who helped put it together.
All right, thanks for that, Anthony. Anybody want to make a comment? John?
Yeah, just a comment on that. It is a good report, but I think we need to remember it's a projection. And we have to maintain our discipline, I think, within our departmental sort of budgets, because unless we stick to our mitigation measures, then obviously they could go adrift. So I think that we need to maintain a discipline on it and not get too excited. The fact that we've got some surpluses, as you said, is just minuscule really in the scheme of things, but the amount of money we spend. But it's the discipline within the departments that I think is all important.
Right, thanks for that. Anybody else want to make a comment? If not, all the recommendations show. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Leader. This is quite a complicated report in some ways, so we'll just take our time going through it, if that's okay, Leader. Not too much time, of course, but I think there's quite a bit of detail we need to get through. So obviously the purpose of this report is to seek approval to submit an updated strategic outline case for our post-16th century in Tornvine in Cwmbran. members will remember that we put the last socket in March 2015. Welsh Government responded to that by asking for an alternative proposal that was more affordable, achievable and sustainable, and that would also facilitate the delivery of the rest of the 21st Century Schools programme. So what you've got in front of you in terms of the new SOC is a proposal for build to operate, and that's a key difference for Torvine Council to operate a 1,000 place post-16 centre in Cwmbran on Welsh Government land at an estimated build and fit-out cost of about £25 million. So clearly this proposal is rooted in the policy direction of Welsh Government, and as 50% funders of the proposal, Welsh Government have been really clear with us on a number of key points over the last number of years. They've been very clear that our current approach to post-16 education is not something that they support. So sixth forms based in our schools. The proposal for modest investment previously that we had made at Westmorland and Abersachen, and move towards a federated model across the county borough with all the sixth forms coming together with that extension of sixth form provision in the north of the borough. As a permanent solution, also failed to gain support from Welsh Government. And Welsh Government have also made it clear that funding for the redevelopment across the Ceiliog school, which we're all keen to move on quite quickly, is inextricably linked to the decisions about post-16 education. So this really is a bit of a package deal, if you like. So that means we need to move away from our current model. What we have at the moment isn't going to be funded and isn't going to be supported going forward, hence why we've got a new proposal on the table today. The letter that came back from Welsh Government in response to the previous SOC clearly made a significant change in the tone that they had set previously, which is that they've introduced the option for the solution to post-16 in Torvine to be council-run, council-led, rather than college-led. So in the previous proposal, clearly we would provide some of the funding together with our partners in Coleg Gwent, but the governance arrangements for the new facility would be run by the college. Welsh Government have now opened up the opportunity that this actually could be a council-led provision, which is fundamental to the SOC that you have in front of you today. So moving on to the affordability and financial implications on 5.2 and following. Okay, so the proposal we have to look at in relation not just to this one element within 21st Century Schools, but in terms of the whole programme. So the current programme, as it stands, costs £81.6 million, and is funded 50-50, so half of that coming from Welsh Government, half of it coming from us. Our 40.8 million now is detailed for you in terms of core capital, capital receipts and potential borrowing. The scheme within this report in the attached stock adds an additional £25 million, that's the cost of the new provision, to the overall programme. But that doesn't mean you just add the two numbers together, because there have been some changes, and the report tries to detail those, and I'll summarise those now. The inclusion of a post-16, one thing I should stress is that this proposal is based on an assumption, and that assumption is that the land costs will be provided by Welsh Government, or in fact Welsh Government own the land already, that they won't charge us for the use of that land, or that they'll provide that land at no cost or a peppercorn sort of rate. So that is a significant assumption, which will only get tested when the SOC is actually submitted to Welsh Government, but they've given us every indication that should not be an issue at this point. So the inclusion of a post-16 centre in our revised Band A proposals has a sort of knock-on effect, a beneficial knock-on effect in terms of the rest of the scheme. So it means we should be able to save £4 million from the investment that would have otherwise been made at Abersachen and Westmorland, which won't now be needed, and a further £6 million being the likely reduction in the cost of what we would otherwise have built across the Ceiliog in terms of sixth form provision there. Additionally, there's around about £3.1 million less needed now for the primary bills than was originally budgeted for. So in summary, that means the likely cost is £93.5 million in terms of the total cost, half of that coming from Welsh Government, meaning that both us and Welsh Government have to find an additional 5.95 million, not 12.5 million that you might have thought, because it's £25 million. I hope that is clear, but the detail is in 5.2. So where are we going to find our proportion of that funding from? That's in 5.3 and following. We anticipate there will be some increased capital receipts of £2.5 million based on those already that we know about. Increased prudential borrowing of about 2.2 million based upon savings above those already assumed and already in train. And specific 21st century earmark revenue of about 1.25 million to be achieved largely through the timing of savings made against the need to borrow against to fund capital. So we're confident basically that we have that funding in place. It's not easy or straightforward, but we're confident we can meet that funding requirement. There are risks clearly that you need to consider, which are detailed in 5.4. If we go ahead in terms of finding that capital, then members' opportunities to look at investment elsewhere will be potentially compromised. That is the case. And the impact of our ability to fund anything in Band B, which is 2019 and beyond, is also called into question. We'll have to look again about the affordability of Band B potential schemes. So in terms of the revenue costs for actually running the building, the funding models for post-16 are slightly different for schools. But again, in 5.5, we think we've outlined how we're confident at this point we can actually make sure we can not only build the building but then afford to run it and provide, make that provision for young people. Clearly, any significant change like this, where we're taking out a number of sixth forms and bring them into a new centre, 21st century standards, really exciting, but clearly involves significant change, and there will be some change management costs. We have a regular round of change management within education, but this will be a significant additional burden. And at this stage, it's very hard to know, because we're at such an early outline stage, what that impact would be. But we've put some estimates there of around 700,000 to 1.5 million in terms of change management costs. So Cabinet would need to be aware that if we approve this report today, we'll need to look at how we actually manage that change management cost over time, and subject to approval we'll begin to model this year now going forward what exactly that impact would be and how we can actually meet those costs. So in terms of consultation, the progress to date has relied on consultation that took place as part of the original discussions on transforming post-16 education, and clearly subject to approval, there will be a full consultation with stakeholders at the appropriate point, and we can sort of have that discussion about what that might look like. We've clearly already talked to all schools, head teachers and governors, and we've also kept in very close contact with the college. So college know and have known that we were producing this updated SOC before it was published. And we've, both I and the interim head of the college have a good working relationship, as John does with the college as well, and we continue to work closely, because whatever the outcome, the college will be around providing education for our young people, and we'll need to maintain that strong relationship. So in terms of risks in 8.1, I'll draw your attention to those briefly. Excuse me. There are significant risks in terms of the affordability of the project, which should be noted at this stage. This is a strategic outline case, and there's a lot more detail to be worked on. This is what we're required to do at this stage. There are two other submissions that need to go to Welsh Government, two other stages in terms of the detail that they'll require, which will also provide the detail for us to go out to consultation with the community. So at the moment, this is the outline case, and be aware that things will change. These figures are only estimates at this stage, so there'll be further refinement. The figures are based on today's prices. It's sound like a mortgage warning now that value of things go up and down. Inflation always tends to go up, so clearly what you've got in front of you is what we've been priced for at today. Inflation will have an impact, And there's that assumption at the heart of this proposal that the land is available from Welsh Government either free or at a peppercorn rate. Non-delivery of the anticipated review savings from school closures will also impact on our ability to potentially borrow. So there is some variation potential there too. So that is really the business case. We clearly have to get on with finding a solution for post-16 education. Welsh Government came back, gave us some clear guidance, set us quite a tight time scale, clearly, to provide an updated strategic outline case to go back to them for the 4th of September. Today. We've managed to do that, hence the timing of this Cabinet, and we're ready for any questions that you may have.
Right, thanks for that. Any questions from members? I'll call David Yowell, the Cabinet Member, in to sum up, actually. But, John?
Just one comment on the consultation bit, Dermot, that obviously the stakeholders will be anxious to get engaged within this process now. You did say you will recommence the, what are you going to say, the stakeholder consultations at an appropriate time. Is that after you've submitted this SOC or after we get a result on it?
In a sense, we've never stopped the consultation because clearly we've kept very close with head teachers and governors. At this point, this obviously is now available on the website. I was just speaking to some heads this morning. We were talking about this. We'll have another brief coming up at next week's head teachers meeting. As you can see from the SOC that's obviously attached in Appendix 1, this is a very broad brushstroke document at the moment. We'll need to wait to see what Welsh Government say, because clearly we don't want to go out to a full consultation with the community and Welsh Government turn around and say, actually, no, or we want more work, or we want something different, and that's what they could do. So I think we need to see what Welsh Government think of this, hear what they have to say, and then work up some more detail about what the, more of the actual bill is going to look like and some of the mechanics around that. It will require us, clearly, if we go forward, to go out to consultation, statutory consultation on the closure of sixth forms, and that would provide the perfect opportunity, clearly, to put all of that together at the same time. So we have a more detailed picture of exactly what we're doing in terms of what the proposal will look like, once we know from Welsh Government if they say yes or no, and roll that in with the discussion around the closure of sixth forms, because that will then give us a single point for everyone to come together to look at. Is this the right thing for us to the right thing for us to do is right for learners in Torvine. And we'll anticipate, it's hard to know because we haven't got a timescale really, John, for what's going to come back, but we'd anticipate that will be around the start of the new financial year, about April time, when we'll have that detail together and we'll have that feedback from Welsh Government.
Right, John? Right, Anthony?
Just two things very quickly. First, I think the hard work that's gone in from Dermot, John and David as the executive member should be recognised on this, because I think it's a key step towards getting an equitable post-16 provision for the whole of the borough. And I say that as someone who represents a ward in the middle or north of the borough. I think it's an urgent thing that has needed to be resolved for a long time, and I hope that we can look forward to this being put in place so that pupils across our borough can have an equitable post-16 solution.
Good. Anybody else? No? If not, then Dave?
Thanks, Anthony, for the kind words. I would echo also those sentiments by adding that I understand, because I've been watching it firsthand in the last 5-6 weeks or so since we've had the knockback of the original proposal. There's been a period of intense activity to get this SOC off the ground and in good working order. So thanks for that, and thanks for the hard work that the officers have undertaken on our behalf. I'm not going to comment on the detail of the document because it's pretty clear in the written word, and certainly in spite of Dermot's apparent misgivings, I thought it was a clear expression of the reality of where we are. I'd like to make a few comments, though, on the progress that we're making by looking a little bit backwards. I mean, we've been on a journey for not merely the last 12 months or the last 2 years, but for a couple of decades now. In fact, the rationalisation of post-16 education in the borough is long overdue. And the argument has been advanced on many occasions over the last couple of decades, all to no avail. It's pointless going over the reasons why these previous attempts have failed, but I think it's worth commenting on what many people consider the lost opportunities as a legacy of these failures, and I don't attribute blame to any individual on that. It's just the way that the mechanics of the political processes and the educational processes work out. But we have to say that, well, pupils in Cornbran have been more than adequately provided for during this period of time. Elsewhere in the borough, provision has been patchy at best and non-existent at worst, and this state of affairs clearly can't continue. We have a golden opportunity now to correct the deficiencies that have troubled our post-16 provision in the past, to move away from what is in effect a postcode lottery as far as post-16 education and provision is concerned. What this new provision, or what this new initiative will create, is a modern, fit-for-purpose centre that offers a wider curriculum than that which is currently in existence. And one more importantly, and this is worth emphasising, that will be available to all our pupils irrespective of where they live. There will be those who represent or live in areas currently served by a school with the sixth form, who might feel the need to resist this initiative. To those, I would say that whilst I understand the nature of personal commitment, we have to take decisions based on what is good for the community of Torfaen rather than narrow sectional interests. It might be those who genuinely believe that sixth forms are the best environment to nurture talent. I have sympathy with these arguments as well. Unfortunately, WAG hasn't. They are implacably opposed to this concept of sixth forms in schools. In any event, they believe the sixth forms in schools is unsustainable going forward. There are some as well, and I've heard more recently some people commenting on this is a watered-down version of the original proposal. To those, I would say this, that if you want to view this as a cup half empty, then do so. But I don't take the pessimistic view, I take the rather optimistic one, and this is a half-full cup at worst, and over a period of time, I believe that this cup can be full to the brim. To sum up, the previous proposal was rejected out of hand. Sixth forms in schools are an alien concept as far as WAG is concerned, so the only option left to us, and I think it's a positive one, is the one on the table at the moment, and I think we should embrace it enthusiastically and work with it, because unless we do, it ain't going to be achieved. I commend again the officers for the hard work that they've put into it, and I commend this particular project to you.
Well done, Dave. And myself and the Chief Executive and other members know the hard work that's gone into this, and well done, Dermot, and well done, John. This is an excellent project. It will come through. Thank you for all the work you've done, including over the August holidays as well. I know some people have been at it full time, so thanks for that. All in favour of the project? Thanks so much. Please show. Thank you. The next one is item. Just a minute again. I'm caught yet again. 8. Yeah. 7 actually. No, 8. Where's my paper? Here. Item 8. Which is Mark Sharwood and Keith Rutherford, who's going to talk to us about demand management. You ready? Yeah, over to you.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, members. This paper is a result of a project that's been initiated by the leadership team, and they've decided that because of the sort of resource constraints that we're facing over the following years, that what we want to do is look at how we can manage the demand for our services from members of the public. It started off by identifying the costs for all of our services and the volume of demand. So we now have a list, if you like, of the number of customers each of our services and budgets look after, and the individual cost to serve, average cost to serve per person for each of those. So that was a good start. What we've also done is we've modelled how much we think it costs the authority for 10 customer groups. 9 of those could be considered vulnerable groups, and one of them is the sort of universal customer. And out of that, one of the vulnerable groups was looked after children. It showed to us that we're spending, on average, about 120 or just over £125,000 a year per looked after child. Now, of course, some cost a lot more than that, and some cost less than that, so that's just the average cost. But nonetheless, thinking that we have, at the beginning of this financial year, about 295 looked after children, that represents quite a big cost to the organisation. Not only in terms of money, but in terms of staff time, and of course the impact on those individuals themselves as well. So we decided to look into looked after children and how we might be able to manage the demand on our services by this group of people. And we started off by running a workshop with about 35 professionals who looked after children from across this organisation, but also including health, the RSLs and other partner agencies as well. And they came up with a list of over 150 ideas which we could do, which, if implemented, might reduce the impact, financial or otherwise, of looked after children on public services. We reduced that down to about 74, and then we invited 5 volunteers to have a look, select 5 of those ideas and work them up into wider business cases. And those volunteers came from across our organisation. So they came from social care with Anne Sheehan, came from education with Donna Lewis, they came from housing with Elka Winton, they came from communities with Barbara Howe and David Williams. And the 5 business cases are on page 47. And in summary, if I can find them, included looking into preventing high-risk children from coming into care in the first place. Now, we do have preventative services, but when children and their families have become at what we call threshold 3, they're on the verge of becoming looked after, they've got lots of issues, and they need very intensive support. So one of the ideas is to provide that intensive support for those families. Another one is to review the looked after children on care orders who are currently living at home. Because of the workload on social care, quite often what happens, and 37 cases in the authority currently, we have children who quite possibly do not need to be looked after. They're at home, they've been looked after with support by their parents, but because of the bureaucracy that's needed to get them off the looked after children list, if you like, from being looked after, they're left. And we're putting resources, time, social care workers, caseloads into keeping those in this bureaucratic system. And the idea would be to employ someone to start getting these people off our system. They reduce the cost to us, they reduce the costs to themselves in terms of their own capacity to deal with their own issues, and to be involved in our processes in terms of being looked after. Another idea is to provide psychological support to pupils via a specialist who can help provide support to teachers, to carers, to parents and to children themselves who are at risk of going to PRU or even indeed into residential care outside the authority, which costs us quite a lot of money. The fourth idea is around providing a meaningful relationships programme, initially to prospective teenage mothers, because that is something that we've done ad hoc in the past and stopped 2 babies from becoming lack. And the last idea is to further develop parent and baby placements, where prospective mothers who would otherwise have their children taken away from them will go into a specialist foster care environment where they would be supported to understand how they can look after their child and hopefully not end up with that child being taken away from them in the future. So those were the 5 ideas. And we've also modelled the costs and the benefits associated with that, which are in paragraph 5.26. And while they are not cheap, in total costs about £423,000, the net financial benefit over 3 years would be just over £1.6 million. So quite a significant financial benefit, but the social impact is great too. So we're looking at around 43 looked after children not going into the system or being taken off the list. We're looking at some out-of-county placements not occurring. We're looking at some people not having to enter into the PRU as a result of the support. We're looking at changes in relationships between parents and their children, prospective mothers and their children, and the impacts that surround that, not least of which include reduction in domestic violence, hopefully. So quite a lot of social and financial benefit associated with doing these, if we've got a mind to implement them. One of the things that I would say is if you compare that to some of the pressures on us in the medium-term financial plan, so for around social care, children's services, we've got pressures in the medium-term financial plan around 700,000, and we've got £28 million worth of pressures on us over the whole council in the same period of time. This clearly shows that they can alleviate some of those pressures. Now, the issue is some of these are about future costs to us, not current costs. So they're not cashable savings, but they avoid us making needing to increase financial resources in the future. And we would only get a cashable saving if we can reduce the number of LAC below what we're currently on. And with that in mind, when we presented these ideas to the leadership team, what they said was, yes, they like the idea of implementing them, but it should be included in a wider LAC reduction strategy, and they should be tied together. So, Cabinet, if you've a mind to agree to the implementation of these, paragraph 5.4 shows how we can resource them with a mixture of service reserves and some support from the corporate centre, and those options that you see in front of you have been agreed with the services as well. And if you agree to that, then we would propose a small implementation team led by Keith and Dave Congreve, who would not only manage the implementation of those and monitor their impact, but also the wider LAC reduction strategy. And that's it, members, if you've got any questions.
Thank you very much for that, Mark. Any questions? Richard.
Just to thank Mark for his comprehensive report. I think it was important that he walked you through the process for us to get a grip and an understanding of that. And I'm sure it's beneficial when we look at demand management when it comes to the other factors that Mark identified in his report. It is a pressure on social care looked after children and those at risk. Both Mark's outlined that in his report, and indeed Nigel did in his earlier report. I think an important part of the report for me is the sentence that explains that this is not reducing the cost at the expense of looked after children. We're not shaving off budgets and cutting issues for those at need, and I think that's important to be understood to get the message to get out there. But it is managing that demand in the first instance. There is academic research. Mark's very much touched on how it affects us in the looked after children budget. But there is academic research that goes on and maps individuals through their future. And what we do here now will save public services in the longer term in other interventions. Intervene early and you have less intervention at a later stage. As well as thanking Mark and the team for his report, he did identify 5 people. It is worth mentioning them again: Anne Sheenan, Donna Lewis, Elka Winton, Barbara Howe and David Williams, who developed these business cases on top of their already burdened work schedule as well. So my regards to them for dealing with this and the long-term benefit it will have for this council and public services. I recommend the report to Cabinet.
Thank you, Rich. Any other comments? If not, all agree the report, Joe. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
That concludes the meeting.